Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Thriving in the U.S. as a Racially Conscious Person. My name is Rozina Kapadia. I work for Epic Education as an equity trainer, and I'm here to present to you this presentation. I look forward to interacting with you either after the presentation is over. I'll be giving you my contact information, as well as through the Epic website. So what is thriving in the U.S. as a racially conscious person? So race has been a topic this last couple of months, years, for many of us. Every week we get a notification that something else has happened and that we are either protesting or someone else is being arrested for a crime. We don't talk about race unless something happens. And so Epic's vision is that we talk about race proactively. We talk about it in a positive sense. We ask about it. We learn more information about it. So today I want to talk to you about thriving as a racially conscious person, which means how do we get to a place where we can talk about race openly, we can be vulnerable about it, and we can share our experiences with other people. And so I just want to tell you to sit back, relax, and enjoy this inclusionaires. These are engagement agreements. Typically, they're group agreements that Epic work with, but I do want to encourage you to use this when you're engaging with other people. So listen and hear the speaker. That could be when you're engaging in a topic that you know how to talk about or are comfortable talking about, but also if you're uncomfortable talking about something. Meet the speakers where they're at and make room for differing perspectives. All of us in the world have grown up in very different ways, right? We have different values, we have different cultures, we have different parenting styles, all of these different things. And so it makes sense that we have different perspectives about different things, and that's okay. I'm not saying that you can't have a different perspective. What I'm saying is if you hear a perspective that you're not comfortable with or something that you don't even understand, please let us know and talk about it with each other. Ask more questions. Right? Instead of being confrontational, we encourage you to ask questions to gain a better understanding. Reflect back what you've heard. So sometimes you're going to hear a comment or a statement that's being made that makes you feel a certain way. Reflect back, talk about it, ask more questions. And respect confidentiality. So sometimes race is a topic that people are uncomfortable with because they want to give an experience. Maybe they want to share something that was really difficult for them. Respect them and respect their story. Don't go around sharing it with other people unless you have permission to do so. And then, as always, approach with a growth mindset. We are lifelong learners. You are not at this Inclusioneer conference for the fun of it. Well, for the fun of it too, but also because we're here to learn stuff. So approach with a growth mindset, even if you don't maybe understand what the topic is. And then here are the session outcomes for today. Explore the meaning of race, ethnicity, culture through the critical race theory tenet of counter storytelling. Recognize and share our lived experience in the context of race, ethnicity, and culture. And define actionable steps toward creating a more equitable, compassionate environment using the RIR protocol, which is recognize, interrupt, and repair. The RIR protocol is something that Epic does at every training. It's the foundation of our courses. And today I'll show you and introduce you to it and introduce you to the language of the protocol. And this protocol is a beautiful thing. You can use it with your colleagues. You can use it with your family. You can use it at any time you'd like to engage more positively and compassionately with people. And so we're going to start off with a quick quote by Adichie. And it says, if you want to learn about a culture, listen to the stories. If you want to change a culture, change the stories. And so we know a lot about people's cultures by what we hear. Right? Whether it be on the news, whether it be what our parents taught us, whatever it is. But really, what do we know about the culture unless we speak to someone within the culture, right? And most of the times we hear stories about certain cultures. Are they positive? Are they representing the best part of the culture? Or are they the dominant narratives that are being told to us, right? And what that means is it a story that we are hearing because we're meant to hear it? For instance, I always give the example of Christopher Columbus. When we're growing up, we hear Columbus, what's the phrase? 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, which is great. We learned about it. We learned about what he did, what he found. And then as we get older and we talk about the counter story, we hear about the Native Americans and we hear about their story and really what Columbus was like. So that's a story that's not been told to us. And so for us to change the narrative of this culture of the Native Americans, we need to hear their sides of the story. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to encourage you to listen to counter stories, to ask about counter stories so that you can see the other side. All right, here's EPIC's protocol. So the RIR protocol is 3 easy steps. It's recognize, interrupt, and repair. So let's walk through each of them. So recognize, how does this make me feel? What happens in my body? What does this make me think? So I'll give you an example. So if you hear an inflammatory comment, or you read a statement, or you turn on the news, or you listen to, or you read the newspaper, and you read something or hear something that makes you feel a certain way. So for example, I always give this example as I'm Muslim. So I'm Muslim and I sometimes hear, oh, Muslims are terrorists. Okay, and if you aren't Muslim, so say you hear stories about your kids, or that's gay, or he's retarded, right? When you hear those phrases, how does that make you feel? What happens in your body? Does your face turn red? Do you get embarrassed? Do you feel weird in the pit of your stomach? Do you get hot? Does it feel like an elephant is sitting on your chest? What does it make you feel? And then what does it make you think about this person, maybe about what's happening, right? And so this is something we need to recognize within ourselves, because once we recognize how we feel about a certain thing, it is much easier for us to determine how we're going to interrupt and if we're going to interrupt. Okay, the next step is the interrupt. So what questions can I ask to learn more, to discover intent? How can I voice another experience? How can I share the impact something is having on me? So that would mean asking the person questions. So my go-to interrupt is, I heard you say Muslims are terrorists. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you said that? Or I heard you use the phrase, that's retarded. Can you tell me why you said that phrase? Right? Or I heard you say that's gay. Can you explain to me why you said that's gay? Okay? Ask questions. Listen to what the person is responding. I'll tell you, a lot of the times I've learned that most people, most times, are not actually malicious people. It's maybe an ignorant statement that's being said, or their news or their information or their values came from a certain place, and that's what they're retelling. So a lot of times it's really an engaging conversation to say, hey, you made this comment. Can we talk a little bit more about this? And it gives me a time to voice another experience, right? And I can share how it impacts me. So when you say Muslims are terrorists, this is how it makes me feel. When you use the word retarded, it makes me feel bad because I teach students with special needs, and that's a derogatory term. So interrupting with compassion, not confrontationally, but compassion, so we can continue the conversation. And continuing it means to repair it. And that means you stay connected by having more conversation. So not saying, oh my God, this person made a comment about Muslims, I can never talk to them again. That's not the goal. We're not here to unfriend or to cancel anybody out because they have a differing opinion. We want to engage with them compassionately to understand where they're coming from. And the goal isn't to change somebody's mind within 5 minutes. It's to plant a seed of thought and a different perspective for them. So as we continue today, I encourage you to utilize some of these techniques. And I'm going to point out when we're going to recognize, when we're going to interrupt, and when we're going to repair as we go through the presentation. Next, we're going to watch a video. And as you're watching this video, I encourage you to recognize how this video makes you feel.
I would describe my political views as the new right.
I'd say that I'm left.
Feminism today is man-hating.
I would describe myself as a feminist, 100%.
I don't believe that climate change exists.
We're not taking enough action on climate change.
I think it's about time these people got off the high horse and started looking for credible problems that actually exist.
It's absolutely critical that trans people have their own voice.
That's not right. You can't, you know, you're a man, be a man, or you're a female, be a female.
Women do need to remember that we need you to have our children.
Could I be friends with someone that says a woman's place in the home?
Right, okay, well, I'm an expert at flat packs. If you have any trouble, just watch me.
So it looks like I've got your instructions here.
I think so.
Let me help you.
It's not just that bit there.
Describe what it is like to be you in 5 adjectives.
Okay, frustrating.
Dedicated.
Opinionated,
Lucky.
Ambitious.
offensive,
Solemn. I have ups and downs.
Strong.
I don't want to say attacked. Misunderstood.
Name 3 things you and I have in common.
we're both male, we're both confident, and we're both loudly spoken.
We know each other better than people who've known each other for 10 minutes should.
You seem quite ambitious and positive, and you've got this really, got a glow. Do you know what I'm saying? Your aura's pretty cool.
I'm sensing, are you former military or something?
People have said that, but there is no history. So are you then ex-military?
Yeah.
If you're ex-military, I'm very proud of you already.
Well,
So
I grew up in a bit of a rough state. I've experienced homelessness. I've known what it's like to have absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely most grateful just for life.
We've only just met, but I think you're the sort of person that would listen to me and we'd have a discussion rather than argue.
Yeah, you could hang out with, man.
let's go. My chance.
You're right, mate.
Fitter than I look.
Perfecto.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
So basically, I think we just built a bar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here.
Each take a bottle, place it on its corresponding markings on the bar.
Attention, please now stand to watch a short film.
Feminism today is definitely an excuse for misandry, man-hating.
If somebody said to me that climate change is destroying the world, then I'd say that is total piffle.
So transgender, it is very odd. We're not set up to understand or see things like that.
I am a daughter, a wife. I am transgender.
I feel like the battle for feminism definitely isn't done. The fight is never going to be over, if I'm honest with you.
You now have a choice. You may go, or you can stay and discuss your differences over a beer.
I'm only joking.
You had me for a second then.
Well, I'm having a drink.
I'm having a drink.
Yeah.
I want to discuss.
Beer.
Yeah, beer and discuss.
Cheers.
At the end of the day, mate,
About
I've
reaching
enjoyed
out to
working with
people,
you.
yeah. And, you know, even if you wanted to convince people about your point, the productive thing to do would be to sit
It's
down and have a
engage, it's
beer.
engage.
I've been brought up in a way where everything's black and white, but life isn't black and white.
Yeah, I'm just me.
Yeah.
Smash the patriarchy.
I'll give you my mobile number, you give me yours, and we'll keep in touch. I'd have to tell my girlfriend that I'll be texting another girl. She might be a bit upset with that, but I'll have to get round there.
I'll have to tell my girl.
All right. So here are some thoughts to take home since we can't engage on screen. So recognize what came up for you while watching this video. What surprised you? And what were some takeaways that you have from this video, right? I love this video. It's one of my most favorites, but the reality of it is it doesn't work in 5 minutes, right? So what did you feel as this video was happening? What were you concerned about? What were you happy about? And so think about how this video works and what they were doing to encourage conversation and change. So as we recognize it, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how recognizing is not a linear process, right? A lot of us really do not enjoy being uncomfortable. We don't like the feeling of discomfort. And I give the example of when we used to be able to stand in line. Do you remember the days when we were able to stand in line at Starbucks or the post office or Panera or wherever it was? And if we're alone, the first thing we do is we tend to take out a phone, right? We don't want to be uncomfortable by looking at people or having people look at us. And so we tend to numb ourselves, I'll say, in a way that makes us no longer feel the feeling. And so I encourage you to let this discomfort actually ride out. And so here's how that typically is done. So you feel something. So maybe it's a statement that's being made to you, right? It's uncomfortable. And so typically what we do is right here. We go through the I numb. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. I'm out. Okay. And that's our usual go-to response. But if you stick with the discomfort, you'll notice the resistance, right? You'll notice how much you don't like it. But then you're going to actually be okay with the feeling because you'll be able to process this feeling. Eventually, your body will relax. You'll have different sensations, and then eventually the feeling will pass. And I always tell people on the other side of discomfort is actually where change happens. We don't like it, but really most of the time on the outside is where we actually change. And I'll give an example. If you have to change jobs or something changes for you and you didn't agree to it, it makes you feel a certain way. But if you ride it out and let it go, typically it comes out okay. And so I encourage you the next time you're having a difficult conversation, not to just be like, nope, I'm out of here, but to really engage and to sit with it, to process it. And whatever the feeling is, whether it's happy, sad, angry, frustrated, sit with it. Let your body talk it through. Let your mind talk it through so that you can let it pass. All right, so let's move into the topic of race. So race is associated with skin color in the US. It's how we identify and how we are identified. It's a social construct. It's embedded into the foundation of the country and its systems. It has positive and negative associations. And it includes white people and people of color. So let's talk about this a little bit. So when I say it's a social construct, what I mean by that is that it was actually created by society. Race didn't exist before. Society created it so we can actually put people in pockets and put people in sections. And so that's why it exists. So certain people are put in certain ways, whether it be financially, whether it be anything else. But there are certain people that are given certain rights. And this allows people to continue to be marginalized, right? Because it's a social construct. It's embedded in the foundation of the country and its systems. And I always give the example of education, right? Our system of education has been created for someone who is general ed, so none of our students as special ed students, right? For somebody who's white, who has two parents, who moderate income, parents are maybe educated, but it doesn't really look at all of the other things like socioeconomic. It doesn't take disability into account. It doesn't take all of the rest of these things into account. So when we talk about how our systems are failing our students, this is what we mean by that, right? Because systems, the current system that's in place is for a current group of people. And none of our students as inclusionaires fit those profiles, right? And students who are a different race don't fit that profile. And so typically it's positive and negative, and then it includes white people and people of color. Next, we talk about ethnicity, right? So ethnicity is different. It's belonging to a group that shares the same characteristic, such as country of origin, language, religion, ancestry, and culture. So examples of ethnicity are Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. And the racial category is Asian. So I was born in Pakistan, and so my ethnicity is Pakistani. I speak Urdu and a couple of other languages. I'm a Muslim. And so those are things that are part of my ethnic identity. And then culture. Culture is how we live our daily lives. It involves customs and traditions and patterns of behavior, worldviews, systems of social organization, language, ideas, and material artifacts. And this is something I really enjoy talking about, is different cultures, because culture doesn't necessarily mean what was passed down from your family in the sense of has to do with your religion or your background or your ethnicity. But cultures are traditions that you have created within your family. Cultures are traditions that you have on Thanksgiving or Easter or birthdays. I just found out that somebody, there's a group of people, that family, that when they cut their birthday cake, they have to scream at the top of their lungs. That's their family tradition for cutting a birthday cake, which I now think is amazing. But that's their culture. That's their tradition that they've carried on, which I think is amazing. And according to them, it's been like I don't know how many family members in the decades of making that it's been happening, but it has been happening. And so it is connected to our race and ethnicity along with other identities. And other identity means other identities that we have. So not necessarily having to do with race or culture or ethnicity. Culture can guide, influence, and shape our behaviors, right? It makes us who we are. These traditions, these customs, these patterns of behavior, the world views that we have, they shape us. They shape our behaviors. They shape what jobs we go after, what types of people we interact with, all of these different things. But also culture is something that can change over time, right? As you get older, I have different cultures in my parents' house than I have in my own house, right? And as time that's shifted because of certain cultures that I've wanted. So let's talk about where these identity developments come, when they come into place for us. So racial and ethnic identity development takes place alongside of adolescent development. So many people's earliest experience of race occurs in childhood, adolescence, and stems from racism or bias. And so what does that mean? So this means that when you're young, you have your earliest experience of race. And I'll give you an example of my earliest experience of race. When I was younger, kindergarten, first grade, I remember a young girl trying to clean my skin because she thought it was dirty, right? Because I was darker than everybody else in the classroom. I didn't understand it then, but now I know what that means, right? And a lot of times it's not a positive experience. I can tell you when I was younger in elementary school and middle school, I was ashamed of being Muslim. I was ashamed of being brown. I really wanted to be white so that I didn't have to deal with a lot of stuff that I dealt with. And I know that there are students that are still feeling this way or are still going through this. So I'd like you to think about when you remembered your first experience of race or bias. And then here are some ways to think about identity development. The beautiful part is it's fluid, so it changes for us throughout our life, right? It's not a one way to think about it. It's constant. It might be linear, but it might be times where we revisit certain stage. So when I was going through my own challenge of East meets West and where I really was, I remember revisiting times and being like, I don't really like being like this, but then being okay with it and then going back to not being okay with it. Okay. It's often dictated by our life experiences. So whether they're good or bad, that typically dictates what we do and how we feel and how we act. Time spent in various stages from person to person. So some people stay in stages longer than other people's, and that's okay. That's for everybody to develop their own identity. Okay. And it's important to understand development models because they help us understand ourselves in relation to others. So we have this inherent need as humans to compare ourselves with other people. But the thing is, our journey is different, right? Everybody's journey is different. That's what makes us so incredible because of the diversity that we bring. And so we have to understand that we are on our own journey and our identity is going to be developed through ourselves and not as we compare ourselves to other people. So we're going to talk a little bit about counter storytelling. So critical race theory tenets, something EPIC talks about, there are 5 of them, okay? We have counter storytelling, permanence of racism, whiteness as property, interest conversion, and critique of liberalism. Today, we're going to focus on the counter storytelling, okay? The story that's not necessarily heard. So counter storytelling. There's a narrative that often goes untold, but is necessary to understand the experiences of people, students of color, and to challenge the normalized dialogues that perpetuate racial stereotypes. And earlier I had given an example of Christopher Columbus, right? And then the Native Americans. So the narrative that went untold was the Native Americans, right? But it's important for us to know that. It's important for us to learn that Columbus came onto Native American land, because otherwise it seems like he's this great hero when in reality he's not. And so we're perpetuating these racial stereotypes. So we're going to watch another video. And in this video, I also want you to take and start utilizing the protocol. Recognize how this video makes you feel, but how the interruption happened in this video.
I come from a conventional middle-class Nigerian family. My father was a professor. My mother was an administrator. And so we had, as was the norm, live-in domestic help who would often come from nearby rural villages. So the year I turned 8, we got a new houseboy. His name was Fide. The only thing my mother told us about him was that his family was very poor. My mother sent yams and rice and our old clothes to his family. And when I didn't finish my dinner, my mother would say, "Finish your food. Don't you know people like Fide's family have nothing?" So I felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. Years later, I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States. I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She assumed that I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this: she had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me as an African was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way, no possibility of feelings more complex than pity, no possibility of a connection as human equals. So that is how to create a single story. Show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. It is impossible to talk about the single story without talking about power. There is a word, an Igbo word, that I think about whenever I think about the power structures of the world, and it is nkali. It's a noun that loosely translates to be greater than another. Like our economic and political worlds, stories too are defined by the principle of nkali. How they are told, who tells them, when they are told, how many stories are told, are really dependent on power. Power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. The Palestinian poet Mourid Barghouti writes that if you want to dispossess a people, the simplest way to do it is to tell their story and to start with secondly. Start the story with the arrows of the Native Americans and not with the arrival of the British, and you have an entirely different story. Start the story with the failure of the African state and not with the colonial creation of the African state, and you have an entirely different story.
All right. So here are some thoughts for you to take home. How does this video illustrate the tenet of counter storytelling? What does she say? How does she connect counter storytelling to our expectation of other people? And then how can we look for or recognize the counter stories around us? They're everywhere around us, I promise you this. But how can we learn them? And so here is how we can talk a little bit more about this. So counter storytelling, when we hear a certain story, how we can learn more is typically by interrupting the dominant story. So I'm going to give you a little bit of how to interrupt. And so with Epic, we talk about interrupting with compassion. Because if you interrupt with confrontation, I can guarantee you it's not going to go well. So how do we interrupt with compassion? So we've provided some dialogues, sentence stems for you. And you can use any of these, you can merge them together, you can come up with your own. But I encourage you to come up with some interruption stems so that you have them ready in case you need to use them. My go-to is, I heard you say this, can you tell me a little bit more about why you said that? It's always to ask for more information. I want to understand where you got that knowledge from, where you feel like that value came from. And most of the time, I'll be honest, when I talk to people about being Muslim or I hear a derogatory comment about Muslim people, 99% of the time, it's not malicious. It's genuine ignorance, or the person only has one news source, or this is the value that their family grew up with, right? And this is what they talked about, or they've never met a Muslim person. And so when you get a chance to interact with other people, this is how we do it. And so I encourage you to use these sentence stems or even to come up with any of your own so that you can practice this. And then we encourage the repair piece. When I started with Epic, I used to think that the interrupt piece was actually the most important because it was how I would engage with in the dialogue compassionately. And over the time that I've worked with Epic, actually my favorite now is repair, and what I feel like is the most important. And here's why. I feel like we live in a community and a culture now where we can cancel people out, or as I like to say, unfriend people, right? So if we don't agree with people, we don't like what they said or how they said it, we're like, I'm just never going to talk to this person again. I don't need to. And that's one way of doing stuff. But the reality of it is, if we do that, that's not really understanding or being compassionate to the other person. So repair it is to keep the issue on the table until it's resolved. So inviting connection and inclusion, right? And so there are so many different ways to do that. So seek and share more information, learn together, all of these different ones. I've highlighted the two that I believe for me are the most important. And they are to share your why. Why are you feeling, why do you need to stand up for this? And I'll tell you, all the jobs that I've had, I'm currently an equity trainer, but I started my career as a special ed teacher, right? Actually as a paraprofessional. And my why are my students. I want to, for them, be a better person, but I want to advocate for them. And that's my why. So if I hear somebody making a comment or about students saying, oh, he's retarded, or Black students don't learn as well as other students, it's my responsibility to step in. That's my why. They are my why. And for me, it's very important to know that and to remember that. So then it becomes easier for me to interrupt someone, especially if it's my colleague or somebody that I am maybe afraid to interrupt. And then the second one is model what it looks like to respectfully engage. I always tell teachers, your students are watching you all the time. Whether you want them to or not, they are watching you. Not only your students, but your children at home, right? Your colleagues, if they're younger than you or you've had more experience. And this allows you to model what it looks like to respectfully engage, which is so, so important for us. It's not name calling, it's not belittling the other person, it's not making fun of their culture or their perspective, right? It's modeling respectful engagement. I don't understand what you're saying, please explain it to me a little more, right? And that's so important for us, right? Because if we model this behavior, our students will pick up on this. And imagine a bunch of students that are able to model positive engagement behaviors, right? Such an amazing thing. So I encourage you to really use this protocol as you interact with your colleagues and your students. So what we're going to do next is a little bit of an activity. And I encourage you to grab a piece of paper and to do this activity with me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you my personality tree, but I'm going to walk you through the different aspects. Because for us to be racially conscious, we really need to address ourselves. Epic prides itself on really working with people and doing some self-reflective work. Because here's the thing, you can't understand what you stand for unless you realize what your values are and where they've come from, okay? And so as we go through this personality tree, we're gonna talk about these things. And you'll get an opportunity to identify all of these things for yourself. So I encourage you to grab something so that you can write these down. Again, you're not showing this to anybody unless you would like to do this activity as a family, which I highly encourage as well. So the first thing we talk about is our root system, right? It's so where did you come from? right? This can be your hometown, state, country, and it includes aspects of your culture, ethnicity, and nationality or race. So anywhere. So whether you were born in Kansas, I was born in Pakistan, whether you're born here in California, anything you came from, right? It also described your family and community growing up. Where did you feel like you belonged? What did your family and community believe about people who were different from you? So if you were white, what did they say about Black folks, about Latin folks? If you were straight, what did they say about LGBTQ community, right? Did they talk about it? How did you know what their beliefs were? And then what specific identities are important to you and your family and community, right? And this isn't necessarily things that you believe right now, right? I do this training a lot and I always interact with people, and so many will say, well, you know, I grew up in a really racist household, but that's not what I'm teaching my children. So ours change, but where did yours come from? Where did your thoughts and values originate from? And so I'll show you mine. So here's my amazing family. So my parents, then this is my older brother. And so my family was very big. We migrated here when I was young, and my parents came so I could have a better future. And so what was taught in my house? Compassion, empathy, right? I'm Muslim, so we had the traditional Muslim family. We were really big on assisting others. My parents, my brother and I used to joke and call it Hotel Kapadia, because we had so many family members come in when they were migrating to the US to stay with us before they went off on their own. My parents were like that, right? No matter how much money we had or didn't have, they were always willing to support another person. And they always believed in family happiness, right? My parents created a really tight bond between my brother and I. Because for them, family is really important, and I'm still like that. Family to me is incredibly important. That value didn't shift for me, okay? And then my mother's line of, you got to leave the world a better place by being a better person, right? So we did volunteer work. My mother still continues to do volunteer work to this day, right? And it's something ingrained in us. I do volunteer work on the side because that's an important part of our value system and our culture. Next, we look at the ground. So these ground represents the life that you live. So these habits or things that you have chosen to do for yourself that help you define and support who you are as a person. So take a couple of seconds and write down or think about what that is, right? And the thing is, if you now live in a different household than where you got your roots from, are there differences? And if so, how did you decide to make differences? Or what made you change these differences? But these are habits that support you right now in your life, okay? And things that you have chosen to do for yourself, deliberately chosen. And so here's my groundwork. Right? First and foremost, I will always be a teacher. That was my favorite job in the world, and I always tell people I will always go back to that one day, because truly my favorite job in the world. And then here's my EPIC family, right? I'm currently an EPIC education family member, and this is my family. They're my groundwork. They teach me new things every single day of my life, right? I can ask them questions. I can engage with them compassionately and learn more information about things that I didn't know, right? I'm actually a yoga instructor as well, so that I build that into my life of how I practice and how I work on my mental health. I'm an inclusioneer. This was us last year when we were able to meet in person. Remember that, guys? But I will always be. The Inclusion Collaborative is near and dear to my heart. Shout out to Kathy, who I've worked with for years now. And this is such a great organization that I'm so incredibly proud to be a part of. And then this is my current profession. I work with different school districts on equity work. So this is Eastside San Jose. And I work with them and their equity team on how to make their staff and their school district equitable, which is such an amazing work. And then this is my child Potato, who teaches me patience and how to really live each day as a dog, very excited and very true to myself. So this is my groundwork. Right? And there's so much more that I haven't put in here, but these are what makes me tick. So what makes you tick? And then finally, we will look at our thorns. I do want to side note and say that typically when we do this tree activity, there's a lot more parts to this because we're complex beings. So we have a lot of things that are part of us. But for brevity's sake, I'm going to do this in only 3 parts. But this is one of the most important, and that's your thorns. So this represents challenges and threats and difficulties that you have faced. What does that look like? Right? What are some of your challenges? What are some of your threats? And what are some of your difficulties? And it's important for us to acknowledge this because when we acknowledge it, we can actually work with it to help it no longer be that. And so what are some of my threats? Honestly, myself. So I genuinely put this up there because I do believe that I am my own challenge. But the reality of it is, here are my thorns. All of the baggage that I have from everything that I've done, right? From my past jobs, from my horrible bosses, from all these different things that I've had to deal with. I bring that everywhere I go. And it's really important to me to work on releasing that. Societal expectations, where I'm supposed to be at my age, okay? How many kids I'm supposed to have. I'm supposed to be married. All of these different things that come into place, right? And societal expectations are ever changing, but they're out there. And we take it upon ourselves to think that we have to do certain things by a certain age. And that's not necessary for us. So that's also something that I'm working on. And then imposter syndrome. So for me, this is actually one of the biggest ones and the ones that it's at the forefront for me right now. It's imposter syndrome is actually believing that maybe I don't belong somewhere because I don't deserve it or I'm not good enough for this. And this is something that I struggle with and I have struggled with. And especially as I move up in my career and my education, it's something that sticks with me. And so for me, it's something that I'm working on a regular basis. And so I have skills and I'm doing things to help support me so that I can let these things go. Because it's important for us to identify these so that we can let them go. And so here are some thoughts I want you to take home. So when we talk about your roots, right? So write them down, identify them. And then even if you need to, maybe go back to your family, go back to your roots, talk to your siblings, but understand where you've come from, okay? And then your groundwork. Do people make assumptions, accurate or inaccurate, about your chosen attitudes, beliefs, or habits? What is the impact of these assumptions on you, right? People assume a lot of stuff about everybody. Do they bother you? Do you take them with you? Do you carry them with you? And why? And then what is the impact of these? And what can you do about that? And then thorns. What challenges have you faced in life based on some of your identities? How have they shaped you who you are today? Right? Granted, I carry the baggage with me, but all of the baggage that I have made me who I am today. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's probably important for me to leave it so that I can carry other stuff that I need to for the rest of my life. Right? And then think about the students that you serve or the colleagues that you work with. Are there aspects of their identities that enable or prevent you from building a relationship with them? Are there certain thorns that people have that you feel like you can't engage with them about? So how do we interrupt that? How do we learn more about that so that we can have a relationship with them, right? And for yourself, what piece of wisdom or thorn are you ready to change or let go of? And then how could this benefit you? And for me personally, if I let go of the imposter syndrome, I know that I could be a better version of myself, right? And that's so important for me, especially as I'm modeling for students or modeling for teachers or other educators. And it benefits me because it takes a weight off of me, right? And it makes me have a better sense of myself. So think about some of your thorns and then think about the ones that you're ready to change and let go of. How can we do that? And then before I end, I just wanted to give you a little more additional information. So Epic Education is our website. We offer webinars, online courses, and podcasts, so you can actually learn a little bit more about this. So if you thought this session was beneficial or you want to know a little bit more, please engage with us, right? We're here to help support you in your learning. So connect with us in any way that you need to. Or if you're not sure where to start, we have a podcast. Listen to our podcast, and we talk about various things, and we interview a lot of different types of people, and some people who are still struggling with their journey on race. So I encourage you to reach out to us and to talk to us about any of this stuff. And if you have any questions, please, again, reach out to us at epiceducation.com. My name is Rozina. You can always reach out to me. My contact information is on our website as well. So you can ask questions that you need to ask so that you can get a better understanding of who you are, where you come from, and how you can be a racially conscious person. And if you're able to do so, I know that there are other feedback forms that you're going to do, but if you have a moment to do this feedback, I encourage you to do the feedback so that you can show us and tell us how we did or how I did, and what else you would like to know, or what else you would like the Inclusion Collaborative to bring forth with us. And with that, I am done. Thank you so much for participating in this, and I hope you appreciated and enjoyed it. Have a wonderful day.